It is January 29th. That is Will. I'm Jake, and this is Statletics Basketball. And Will, let's just jump right into it. Marquette dominated Seton Hall by 18. What all did you see? I know you put a little action on this game.
Yeah, big conference win at home for the Marquette Golden Eagles against a very frisky Seton Hall team. Seton Hall has now dropped 3 straight, losing this one emphatically. You and I both were on Marquette in this one. Kind of feel like maybe Seton Hall was showing some flashes that might not be reflective of who they actually are as a team early in the year, winning some big games at home. So we took advantage of maybe some bias with the spread, and Marquette covered easily.
Yeah, I think the biggest deal in this game was Marquette already lost to Seton Hall at Seton Hall earlier in the season. It was a bounce back spot for them. They were extra motivated. Seton Hall has historically not been very good away from home. And in the Big East, the home field advantage really matters. Marquette almost shot 40% from three, and they really just kept up pace with the rebounding and everything. I think that it was just a good win for Shaka Smart and the guys. A good spot for Marquette, 100%. And really, Seton Hall losing 3 in a row is a big deal. So hopefully they can continue to bounce back. They were looking really scary there for a little bit there. Stick it in, or going over to the Big 12, Kansas lost to Iowa State in the biggest game on Saturday. How concerned are you about the Jayhawks, Will?
Yeah, I think this matchup was more indicative of the Iowa State Cyclones. This is kind of a coming out party, a statement win at home against Kansas. I think this shows more of how good they are as opposed to making me worried about Kansas. Yeah, Kansas has dropped a few the past couple weeks. But Iowa State is a formidable opponent, and on the road, that's a tough game to win. Hunter Dickinson with another great performance, 20 and 15. But I think really where the difference was is in Kevin McCullough's production from this game. He really struggled from the field, didn't hit a three until like the last 2 or 3 minutes. Then on the other side, Trey King scored 21 for the Cyclones. So I really think it was just, Iowa State shot it better at home. But I was pretty happy that Kevin McCullough hit those 2 threes at the end of the game because I had him over 1.5 threes. So watching him start out 0 for 6 was very frustrating. And then also the 3 at the buzzer was a little backdoor cover for Kansas bettors to cover that 4.5 point spread. So I think when that shot went in, there were a lot of people cheering, a lot of people pretty upset, but I was very happy to see that one go through the net at the buzzer.
Glad you covered the prize picks entry, Will. PP entry is as we like to call it. Yeah, this game really came down to shooting. Iowa State shot made 7 more threes than Kansas. Other than that, it was a really, really tight, contested game. Rebounds were about even, field goal percentage was about even, but it came down to home field advantage and shooting a little bit. So, yeah, I'm not very concerned about Kansas. I think they'll bounce back. They've had a shaky couple weeks, losing to West Virginia last week and then losing here to Iowa State on the road. But they need to get back in their own building. And Hunter Dickinson continues to impress. Kevin McCullough, he will step up in the big moments. I'm very confident in that. So we'll see. Sticking in the Big 12, Texas Tech beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma, and I was very sad to see this. Ended up putting it out on the Statletics bet account. I really thought that Oklahoma was going to cover here.
Follow us at Statletics_bets on Twitter for all the picks. Sorry, Jake, continue.
True. Yep. Put it out there. Oklahoma was 3.5 point favorites. I was very confident in this pick. Oklahoma lost last week to Texas. I thought it was a good bounce back spot at home against a good Texas Tech team. Thought they were going to show up motivated, play well, but so did Texas Tech. They showed up motivated too. They shot 50% from the field, a good 40% from three, and really everything was about even. Oklahoma also shot 50% from the field, and rebounds were even, turnovers were even. This game was just tight. It felt like somebody was leading every time I looked up. I'm not very concerned about Oklahoma here. Texas Tech did impress me getting a tough win on the road. But do you think Oklahoma is still a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12?
Yeah, I do. I think this was so Chance McMillan comes off the bench for the Red Raiders. He only averages 10 points a game. He scored 27 and shot 6 of 8 from 3. So I think this game was just a case of one of Texas Tech guys getting really hot and that being the difference in a big conference game. So I wouldn't say I'm too worried about anybody in the Big 12 yet, even though Oklahoma dropped 2 this past week, one to Texas Tech. But I still think it's a very even league. After Houston and Houston and Kansas, I feel like there's a lot of parity and anybody could really beat anybody.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this game just really embodies that, how deep the Big 12 is and how anybody can beat anybody. Texas Tech, I was kind of in the crowd. I didn't think that they were for real, but they seem to be able to play with anybody, and Oklahoma seems to have cooled off a little bit since starting the regular season. I think they won like 10 straight, something like that, something crazy. So maybe they're falling back down to earth a little bit. Coming up on a game in the SEC, Auburn lost to Mississippi State. A lot of people didn't see this coming. You'll be happy to hear that I did and Will didn't. Will, how do you feel about Auburn after you were so confident in them last week and now they dropped 2 in a row?
Yeah, I saw the Bama loss coming. I put out the Bama pick on the Twitter account. That one made sense to me. But this Mississippi State one surprised me. And I think it was more of just Mississippi State wanting it more. Neither team shot it very well. Mississippi State had 14 offensive rebounds, and 6 of those were from Cameron Matthews. So I think just getting those second chance points was really a difference. In a close game between 2 really good teams, Mississippi State has shown that they can really play with anybody in the SEC this year after getting wins over Auburn and Tennessee.
Yeah, 2 huge players. I think Mississippi State is so underrated. They have 2 really underrated players in Tolo Smith and Josh Hubbard. If you watch this game, Josh Hubbard hit big shot after big shot. He hit 1-3 to ice it at the very end of the game. They just would not go away. Tolo Smith, every time he gets the ball in the paint, he ends up getting doubled. He had 3 assists as a big man. And, I mean, if you watch Mississippi State at all, you know that Tolo Smith is their best player, but really seeing some help on the outside, that inside-out action is really, really tough to defend. As well as they defend the ball, all of their games seem to be low scoring, and every game that they win seems to be in the 60s and the 50s. I think I said last week, if Mississippi State's going to win this game, it's going to be low scoring, and they're going to strangle their opponent, and they really did that. They're just super physical. It's like a street fight every time they're out there, and I think that was evident ever since the first SEC game with Tennessee, wherever they took them. I think it was a weeknight, like a Wednesday, and they just beat up on Tennessee, which is usually a more physical team in the SEC, and it didn't matter. And you see it didn't matter here. They're just a tough team to beat at home, and really, I think they're an underrated team in the SEC. I like what I see from Mississippi State. Auburn, on the other hand, I don't know who they're playing next week, but I think they're going to be pretty motivated. I think they play Ole Miss, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but they should be really motivated after dropping 2 that they probably shouldn't have dropped. Maybe they drop 1, but we'll see.
I mean, after the stretch they went on, it's not too surprising to see them drop a couple on the road. Both close games, both emotional games. Both sets of students for the home teams really got up, especially in that rivalry game with Alabama. But they have Vanderbilt at home on Wednesday, so that should be a good bounce back tune-up game for them.
Yeah, yeah. Staying in the Big 12, Baylor lost at home against TCU in a couple of OTs. This is another tough one for me to watch after I put out the Baylor pick. I loved them after they were coming off of losses last week. And really, at home, they've been pretty solid, shooting the ball pretty well. But TCU just went in there and shot it better than them. Baylor shot at 22% from three, 50% from the field. TCU shot above 50% from the field and 40% from three in a pretty tightly contested game, super back and forth. Um, how concerned are you with Baylor after they continually lose games with Texas last week and now to TCU at home?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it, and especially when you're the home team, you really want to win the 3-point battle. They lost the 3-point battle, and they also lost the turnover battle, which those two things you really want to be in the win column for when you're at home. And then Jameer Nelson Jr. for TCU scoring 30 off the bench. He's a senior, still coming off the bench for the Horned Frogs and just had a career game. So that was really fun to see. But no, I wouldn't say I'm super concerned with Baylor. I mean, TCU is a good team. I'm pretty sure, didn't they beat Houston a few weeks ago at Houston? Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I still think Baylor will be in the tournament, and if they're a 9 or 10 seed, that's going to be somebody that a higher seed isn't going to want to play.
Yeah, and with Baylor, they always tend to kind of live and die by the three. They have a really impressive forward, Missy. He seems to get a lot of cleanup, trash points. But if you really look at it, if they don't shoot it well, they usually don't win. And anytime that you lose a big game in your building, it's really deflating. But next week they play UCF and Iowa State, which we'll get to in a little bit. I don't know. I'm in the crowd that I'm a little bit concerned about Baylor on a 3-game skid, going still in conference play. It's early, but it's they need to start getting it together a little bit. They maybe gather some poise. But
yeah, they do need to go 2-0 this week. Go to Central Florida, take care of business, and then opportunity for a really big win at home against Iowa State on Saturday. So yeah, this is a make or break week for Baylor.
Make or break. Agreed. Going over to the ACC, UNC barely escapes FSU away from home. UNC continues to win. I think they're on a 10 or 11 game win streak. Brutal, uh, brutal cover for any Tar Heels better out there. It was a 7.5-point spread. RJ Davis missed a free throw at the very end to cover the 7.5-point spread. I was impressed by UNC. They didn't play all that great this game, but they just hung around there and finally got a couple balls bounced their way, hit some big shots at the end. What did you see from UNC and Florida State?
Yeah, I mean, a win's a win, like you said, especially on the road. This game was closer than the score indicates. I, for a second, thought Florida State might get this win. Weren't they winning at halftime? I'm pretty sure, Florida State.
Yep, they were.
Definitely a good sign for the Tar Heels to say, hey, even though they didn't start out great on the road, they put the pieces together and were able to leave Tallahassee with a W. Another impressive performance from RJ Davis. He continues this outstanding campaign he's had thus far to this point in the year. Armando Bacot actually had a pretty quiet night. He only had 5 points and 7 rebounds, which made way for Harrison Ingram to have one of his best games of the season with 13 points and 17 rebounds. 7 of those were offensive. So, I mean, in a 7-point game, who knows how big of a difference those 7 offensive rebounds made, but definitely a very impressive performance, and nice knowing that even when one of their stars doesn't have the biggest night, they can get the production elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. One thing, this bottle had the spread, or I guess the intensity of this game kind of pegged. It had UNC as a 3-point favorite last week. And really, if you watch this game, it was pretty much a 3-point game the entire way until the very end, whenever they started fouling and then picking up a little bit of trash points. But very tight game. Florida State is pretty big, but they can't shoot. And that kind of bothered Baycott. But RJ Davis just continued to score, and he has played so well this season. I think UNC has a little bit of an argument to be number one. So
For sure.
let's go it over into. I lost my place. Staying in the ACC, Duke slips by Clemson, and what a game this was. I thought Clemson was going to pull this one out. Did you see anything with Blue Devils and Clemson?
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of ugly, I thought. Just the
It was.
shooting. I mean, both teams, and I feel like I've had that experience watching Duke and Clemson in other games this year too, where I just feel like they could be taking better shots constantly, and they're just having to work so hard on offense. Nothing's really coming easily. Which for in two teams who have some really good scores, PJ Hall, Joe Girard, Kyle Filipowski, who am I? Jeremy Roach, but Jeremy Roach was limited this game. He came off the bench. I think he's still recovering from whatever injury he had last week. But yeah, I mean, another situation where, hey, winning a conference game, coming out with a win, that's big time for Duke. But definitely would like to see more out of both these squads.
Yeah, I agree. This game was fun to me because of the intensity of Cameron Indoor Stadium. This is probably like the biggest home game they've had since Arizona earlier in the season. Clemson comes in, they're shaky, they're up and down a little bit. I can't pick them. They seem to play well when I pick against them, and they seem to play horribly when I pick them. But they were a Joe Girard couple shots away from winning this game outright. I saw a stat that Joe Girard in their wins, he averages like 25 points, but in their losses, he has about 12. So they really need some outside scoring pretty badly. They haven't shot the ball well this year, but Duke just continues to get it done at home. They've been a little bit shakier this season with some injuries. I know they lost to Pitt last week, but this is a big game for them going into UNC week. So I think that this will be a good building block for them, especially with them battling injuries.
Absolutely.
Next game, Houston crushes Kansas State. I know you watched this game. You wanted to go over it. What were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so this was the first game of Saturday that I watched. Houston jumped out early on Kansas State. I think they're up like 13-4. So me being my genius self was like, oh, time to live bet Kansas State, The spread's probably jumped a ton. I don't know what it started at, but when I looked at it, it was at 20.5. And I was like, this early in the game, like Kansas State's going to go on a run. Kansas State's, has been good all year. I think they'll be able to keep it within 20. And then Houston just, the difference in effort was evident the entire game on both sides of the ball, just dominating rebounds in the turnover battle. I think the shooting numbers were almost the exact same. From the field, it was close, and then from three, they were both 7 of 21. So it wasn't like Houston just had an insane game scoring the ball compared to Kansas State. They just played way harder, and they're way more athletic. It was really frustrating because I thought I found a really good spot to bet the Wildcats, and then, as it turns out, I was wrong.
Yeah, that's what the stats indicate. Well, Houston went to the line 34 times to Kansas State's 12. So if you look at the pure effort, just getting inside the lane, drawing fouls, really trying to pick up those extra hustle points with the turnover battle, they had 10 less turnovers than Kansas State.
Mm-hmm.
And a good indication of hustle is offensive boards, where they doubled it. So, yeah, Houston's just a more motivated team than Kansas State right now, especially at home in front of their home crowd. They got a big game coming up next week, but it didn't look like they were getting caught in a look-ahead spot at all. They just continually crush people, hold their opponent to under 60 points pretty much every Saturday. It's crazy to watch. They've been playing very, very well. Going over to the SEC and to wrap up our recap from last week, Arkansas lost to Kentucky. This game was a little bit tighter than I thought it was going to be. Arkansas has been playing terrible as of late, but they kept it close in front of their home fans. It seemed like they needed a little bit something to cling on to for the season, kind of hang their hats on. What do you think about this game?
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas obviously has not been very impressive to this point in the season. Actually, quite the opposite, very disappointing. But this was a big game, you know. Arkansas's fans definitely got up for it. College game day, and Arkansas's roster still has that talent that it did when everybody thought they were going to be top 25 team in the preseason. So I think this was a really good win for Kentucky. Both their games last week were on the road. They dropped one to South Carolina. They're back at home for both games this week against Florida, which Florida's obviously outperformed expectations this point in the year, and then probably Kentucky's biggest game of the year so far with Tennessee playing headed to Lexington on Saturday. So I know people are probably like, Kentucky only beat Arkansas by 6 and only scored 63 points, but getting a win on the road in that kind of atmosphere, I don't think it can be understated. And it also shows that they can win in different ways. I mean, they scored 105 points in their win against Georgia and then scored 63 points in their win against Arkansas. So just showing that ability to adjust based on their opponent, I think is really important. And then Antonio Reeves continues to have a great season. He was definitely their highlight on offense, scoring 24. And then Arkansas just struggled shooting it. So yeah, I think it was actually a really good win for Kentucky.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, it was a tough environment, and it's obviously a rivalry game. These two teams have played close games pretty much the entire existence of the SEC. One thing that was kind of surprising, I thought Arkansas without Brazil with a knee injury, I think that they were going to give up a lot of size and a lot of athleticism, but it seemed like they really just hustled and kept with them. They have some sticky guards with L. Ellis and a couple different guys, but I mean the better team won this Saturday, no matter what the environment was, and I think Arkansas was a couple just guys away from stealing this one away. But I agree. I think that this was a big spot for Kentucky, kind of gaining some momentum into the biggest week of their season against Tennessee in rivalry week. So it'll be fun to watch going forward. All right. Going ahead to next week. One of the
best day of basketball, the best slate we've had so far, no doubt about it.
100%.
Next Saturday.
There's multiple games that would highlight basically any Saturday up to this point. Houston at Kansas, Duke at UNC, Tennessee at Kentucky. But we'll start out with Houston at Kansas. So I plugged some numbers into the model earlier, and it has this game at a pick'em with Kansas at home, Houston coming in on Saturday. I think Kansas plays Oklahoma State tomorrow at 9, and then Houston will come in on Saturday. I think Houston is playing Texas today, so they'll have a little bit longer to rest and travel up. Who do you think takes this game and why?
This is a really tough one for me. If the spread is a pick'em, I will likely bet on Kansas just because they're at home. Houston has been really good at home and has dropped a couple conference games on the road. Kansas has been really good at home and has dropped some conference games on the road. So yeah, this one is so tough. I honestly probably won't bet on this one just because I really have no idea. The play styles are different. You know, Kansas is going to put the ball in the bucket. Houston's going to slow it down, play hard, play good defense. But I would, if it is a pick 'em, I would probably lean Kansas just due to the home court advantage playing at the field house.
I lean heavily on Kansas, and I think it's mostly to do with how shaky they've been recently. I think a lot of times we get hung up on recency bias, seeing them lose against West Virginia, seeing them lose against Iowa State, and then seeing Houston crush their opponents week after week. And I think the last game they lost was to TCU a while back. But Houston's been on absolute fire, and Kansas is kind of holding on for dear life. I think that Kansas wins here, and I think that they win by 5+. I think that it's tight, but Kansas kind of separates at the end. They'll be extra motivated. It'll be a packed house. I expect them to get up for this game. Next game, Auburn at Ole Miss. I put this game on here because I think it'll fly under a lot of people's radar. Ole Miss has seemed to be a little bit overrated compared to how they started off the season. I think they've ripped off about 12 straight, something like that. They were the last SEC team to be undefeated. And they cracked the top 25 there for a little bit before they started getting killed they lost to LSU. They got killed by Auburn. But they seem to have gotten back on track. They beat Arkansas and Texas Tech this past week, and they play
won at
Mississippi
Texas
State tomorrow.
A&M.
Texas A&M. But they play at Mississippi State tomorrow, and then they have Auburn visiting. Mississippi State's really good, as we talked about earlier. Obviously, Auburn has played very well lately if you take last week out of it. Will, what's your thoughts on this game?
Another really tough one. Our model has Auburn as a 2-point favorite. If the spread's that tight, I'll probably stay away from it. I really would just want to bet Ole Miss is like a 4 or 5 point underdog. This is a rematch of a game that's already been played at Auburn. Ole Miss coming off a big win at Texas A&M, very impressive. They're kind of in a groove. Auburn's skidding right now. I really want to just say I think Ole Miss is going to win, but I'm struggling to put that out into the universe. So I'll say I think Ole Miss will cover. I think Ole Miss will cover 4 points if that's what the spread is.
I disagree. I think Auburn is going to win by 4+. Really, if that's closer to what the spread ends up being, I don't think that Vegas will put out a 2 number, just because of how good Auburn is and how much they've proven over the course of the season, not this past week. They really do need to win both games this week. Auburn does, and I think that something that goes overlooked a little bit is Texas A&M tomorrow night at Ole Miss. Texas A&M, like we were talking about, is super physical. They play hard. It'll take a lot from Ole Miss to get over Texas A&M. I think that Auburn has a little bit of a tune-up game with Vanderbilt, and then goes to Ole Miss. I think that they'll be rested. I think they'll be ready, and I think that they're pretty much going to crush Ole Miss. If it's not tight, I think if it is tight, I still think they cover 4.
I love it. I love when we're on opposite sides.
Yeah,
all right.
Agreed. Biggest game of the year so far. Duke at UNC. UNC is a 4-point favorite by the model standards. Obviously, they've been on fire lately. Duke's battled some injuries. Will, you look ready to put this pick out in the universe. Let's hear what you have.
No, I mean, the slate is awesome, but I think it's also going to be really tough to bet. I don't think our model has North Carolina as a 4-point favorite. Would you agree? You think the spread's probably going to be bigger than that? Or maybe, I mean, it might even be smaller than that just because it's Duke UNC. Like, these games feels like they're always classics. I think probably 4 or 5 is fair to what the Vegas number will be around, don't you think?
I completely agree. I think that it'll be about that. I think
if
honestly,
that's the case, I will definitely be taking North Carolina. I think they might win by double digits, and that's just because I like watching them so much more than I like watching Duke. Like, I just think they're better. I'm just gonna leave it as simple as that. I just think they have better players. They're having a better year to this point. There's a good chance they split. I think Duke could win this game in Cameron. Yeah, oh yeah. Coach Davis has been coaching his ass off this year. Been very impressive on this streak they've been on. And I don't think it ends on Saturday. I think if this game was at Cameron Indoor, it'd be completely different. But I definitely like the Tar Heels against the Blue Devils on Saturday.
I 100% agree. I think that UNC takes this game, and I think they take it big. If you look at how well they've been playing and how many different ways they can beat you, especially with RJ Davis playing as well as he has been lately, and Jeremy Roach, who would normally probably end up guarding him or Proctor, being a little bit banged up. Obviously, it's a good matchup with Baycott and Filipowski on the inside, but UNC is deeper, they're better coached, and they're at home. I think that this will be a good statement win for them. And Duke's been a little bit shaky lately. I'd like for them to prove it, especially if they're only beating Clemson by 1 at home in a game that they didn't shoot it well. And I mean, frankly, neither did Clemson. I think UNC wins big. I'm excited to watch this game.
Should we agree to place a North Carolina minus 9.5 ticket together, no matter what the spread's at?
I'm in.
Let's do it.
I can't wait to laugh about this next week.
Yeah. Duke's going to win by 20.
Yeah. That's how it goes. Iowa State plays at Baylor on Saturday. Iowa State's coming off probably their biggest win of the year with Kansas. Baylor is coming off probably the worst 3-game skid that they've had in recent memory. They don't lose 3 consecutive games in a row, especially in recent years. Our model has Baylor favored by 4 points at home against Iowa State. I don't know how I feel about this one, Will. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's another tough one. I think if Baylor takes care of business against Central Florida on Wednesday, it would change my outlook on this game. I do think Baylor will win. If it's a 4-point spread, I would probably bet on Iowa State to cover. But I think Baylor takes care of business. We were talking earlier about how this is a make-or-break week for Baylor. Could completely swing their season one way or the other. I think they get 2 wins this week. So assuming the spread is 2 or 3 points more than likely, I'll take Baylor to cover at home.
Yeah, I agree with that. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to pan out. I would not put any of my own money on this game, but Iowa State's been the more impressive team as of late. But recency bias only goes so far, and that's how you lose money. I think that Baylor's going to show up here. They'll be highly motivated, probably a packed house, especially against the Iowa State team that might be in a little bit of a letdown spot after they beat Kansas last week. So we'll see. And here is the game that me and Will have been looking forward to the most, probably all season. Tennessee at Kentucky on Saturday night, primetime game. I think it's an 8:30 tip. Right now our model has Kentucky favored by 2 points. These teams are pretty much even. On a neutral court, I believe Tennessee might be favored by a point, maybe. Really, this is these are 2 teams that are very, very even, very, very talented. One's a little bit more senior than the other, but honestly, this game, I could see it going either way. Will, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, there are really only 3 SEC Player of the Year candidates. You got Mark Sears from Bama, and then Antonio Reeves from Kentucky, and Dalton Connect with Tennessee. So 2 of the best players in the conference going head-to-head. And, I mean, we're Vols fans, so I don't want to say this, but, I mean, at some point, Dalton Connect is going to stop scoring 30 points a game. I think he scored 25 in, 5 straight games or something crazy like that. But I don't think that's going to be on Saturday because he plays really well on the road. Most of his big games, I think he's averaging 24 on the road this year, which is just insane. Oh, this one is so tough because I don't want to bet against either of these teams right now. And it always feels like Tennessee and Kentucky split. The home teams win each game. But Kentucky has definitely tripped up some. And, I like the Vols to go into Lexington and get a win this week.
Yeah, this kills me as a Vol fan to say this, but I don't think this is Tennessee's week. Kentucky is, like I said, it's a very even team. They play very well at home. I don't think they've lost a game at home all year, and they've played some very good teams. A really impressive win beating UNC earlier in the season. They show up against quality opponents. It seems like the games that they lose are the games that kind of get overlooked. Weeknight conference games, especially, but in big games, they've continually beat good teams, and this qualifies as a big game with a good team in Tennessee. We always split with them. They're at home. I think that home field advantage matters in this one. I think that Kentucky ends up taking it. It pains me to say it, but I don't know. If you look at a lot of Tennessee games on the road, Tennessee has struggled on the road. They lost to Texas, or no, not Texas A&M. They lost to Mississippi State. They barely beat Georgia. They just haven't played as consistent away from home. And we all know Tennessee's dangerous at home, but on the road at Kentucky, I don't know. I just don't like the spot for Tennessee.
I mean, I hear you, but I mean, how can you? I don't see how you can watch Dalton Connect over the past 5 games and think, I don't think he can go into Lexington and get a win. I mean, he's just been a superhero putting the basketball in the bucket, and it's been a true joy to watch. And we're kind of overlooking the South Carolina game. South Carolina's been really good to this point. Tennessee has them at home on Tuesday. I think if South Carolina comes in and shakes Tennessee's cages a little bit, maybe makes it closer, even gets a win, that puts Tennessee in an even better spot against Kentucky on Saturday. So yeah, I don't know. I really like the Vols this weekend, and I mean, when it comes back around, when Kentucky visits Knoxville, I might feel differently, but at this point, I'm just gonna. Tennessee's playing as good as anybody in the country right now, and I'm gonna assume they continue that into this weekend.
I hope so. I really do. But I'm glad you brought up South Carolina. South Carolina beat Kentucky last week in a game that it really looks like Kentucky didn't care about, which was really strange.
That one was so
I
frustrating.
hope that's not the case. It was a very weird game to watch, but I hope that's not the case this week with South Carolina coming in. Tennessee has played lights out at home, so I hope they continue that. They beat Alabama by 20. So we will see. Off to the Big Ten. Purdue plays at Wisconsin on Sunday. Usually we don't cover Sunday games, but this game is going to be fun. Wisconsin right now at by our model standards is favored by a point. If that actually the model favored them by less than a point, but it was close enough to round up. Pretty much a pick 'em. Purdue has been dominant lately. They haven't really stuttered against anyone. Zach Edey has been unstoppable. Probably going to win back-to-back Player of the Year awards, and they're going into Wisconsin, who has slowly been chugging along, been very consistent, hasn't been tripped up much. I think they lost one to Penn State a while back in a game that Penn State just exploded offensively. But really, Wisconsin's been impressive. Purdue's been impressive. This game is going to be fun to watch. Will, how you feel about this game? Do you think that Wisconsin can trip them up a little bit?
You go first for this one. I want to hear what you think before I say what I think.
So I went back and forth on this game quite a bit. But I think that I ultimately landed on Purdue's the better team. They have the best player in the country in Zach Edey. They have been largely unstoppable, and he looks like he's playing motivated basketball from last year. Them losing in the tournament the way that they did, I don't think it's set right with them. They have killed everybody that they've played, and they've played great teams, but it just seems like they just don't lose. They take care of business away from home. Zach Edey's not really affected by travel. He seems to be the same player on the road that he is at home, and he's just slowly improved his game from the free throw line. And I mean, they have been fun to watch. They have Lawyer that shoots lights out. They're a good 1-2 punch. I like Purdue in a close one, especially if they're dogs. I feel like the value is not ever going to be there for them, and I think it's a good spot for them as well. They'll be motivated on Sunday.
I agree with you. It's definitely going to be a close spread. Ken Palm has Purdue as a 2-point favorite, so I feel like I don't know if Purdue will be underdogs. I feel like I'm probably just going to bet whichever team is the underdog, which I think is going to be Wisconsin, because I think it is going to be just an absolute madhouse in that arena on Sunday, and I just think the home court advantage might be too much. Isn't the new AP poll came out today? I'm pretty sure Wisconsin is in the top 5.
I don't know. Hold on.
I'm pulling it up right now. But I mean, sorry, Wisconsin is 6th.
Yeah, they're 6th.
Which I know they've been playing well, and people are kind of high on them right now. They just got a big win over Michigan State. But I don't know. I feel like there's something about them that I'm not seeing that other people are seeing. And I know the home court advantage is going to play a huge factor on Sunday. So I like Wisconsin to get a win. And if it's like a 1 or 2 point spread, I also like them to cover.
Yeah, I think that a good game that is comparative to this game would be Tennessee went to Wisconsin early in the season. I know that this is a different team than what it was, but if you look at the stats, Tennessee out-rebounded them. If you watch the game, it looked like Tennessee's size really was a big difference in this game. Jonas Adu was big. He almost had a double-double, but his impact on the defensive end was huge. I really do think that Wisconsin will keep this one close, but overall, I mean, they've haven't played that many good teams. They played Arizona, which they lost to away from home. They beat Marquette. Other than that, they've played a bunch of Big Ten teams that, I mean, are tough. Beating Michigan State by 20 points is not easy. Beating Indiana by almost 20 points is not easy. I mean, when you look at it, they've been impressive, but are they frauds or not? I'm not exactly sure, but I will go with the proven commodity in Purdue on Saturday. And that wraps up our look ahead for Saturday's slate. Personally, this is the most excited I've been about a college basketball slate in a long time. Saturday will be super fun and super interesting. We'll learn a lot about these teams closing in on February, getting closer to March every day. Sticking in the Big Ten, just since we wrapped up talking about Purdue, Wisconsin, lately we've been looking at different conferences and who has the best odds to win the conference. Who's our favorite? Who do we think might be a good underdog at good value to win the conference? And this one is a little bit more straightforward than others. I looked at the stats, or I looked at FanDuel earlier today, and Purdue is currently minus 280 to win the Big Ten regular season championship. And the next closest team is Wisconsin at plus 230. After that, all others are 1,900 and up as far as odds. It's either Purdue or Wisconsin here for me. And seeing as how Wisconsin honestly has a better conference record than Purdue, I think that they're kind of baking in the fact that Purdue's going to beat Wisconsin on Saturday. But to me, if you like Wisconsin to win the game on Saturday, then you should like them to win the conference because, well, I mean, that would put them in a 2-game lead ahead of Purdue.
Do they play a second time?
They play the last game of the year at Purdue.
So that line is going to change dramatically if Wisconsin gets a win on Saturday. I agree with you. So, yeah, I think that would be a smart ticket going ahead and getting it in now. Similar with the ACC. North Carolina is a big favorite to win the ACC regular season title right now. Duke in second, and then everybody else has really high odds. So I think if Duke is able to pull out a win on Saturday, their odds will significantly change as well. So probably a good spot if you want to get some action down on futures for regular season conference champions. Good spot for both Duke and Wisconsin. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think Purdue's going to take care of business, win the Big Ten, be a 1 seed, and then similar with North Carolina, I think they'll also be a 1 seed. So, I mean, the only team worth putting money on, like you mentioned, is Wisconsin. But yeah, I think ultimately Purdue is going to take care of business and win the regular season Big Ten title.
The more I look at it, the more I talk myself into Wisconsin, even though I just predicted Purdue to win on Saturday. Purdue plays Illinois later in the season at Illinois, and then they play Wisconsin again, obviously. But I mean, that's two tough games to end off the season, especially if Wisconsin steals one tomorrow or on Sunday. Wisconsin doesn't play another regular season game against the top 25. Actually, they play Illinois. I didn't see that game. They play Illinois. They play Illinois close to the end of the season, but it's at Wisconsin, so I still feel good about it. I think that Wisconsin has a better shot than plus 230. I mean, that value is kind of head scratcher to me, but at the same time, if Purdue beats them twice and takes care of business, then the Big Ten is there.
If Purdue sweeps them, Purdue wins the title. I think that's why the odds. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, which they'll be big favorites at home against Wisconsin, and they should be. But if Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten, they need to win on Sunday. And if you like Wisconsin to win, you might as well put a future on them to win the conference. It's good value. And I don't hate it, even though I picked Purdue to win. So we'll see. A conference that's pretty tight, and I feel like a lot of teams could win, and there's a lot of value on the board, is the Big 12. Right now, the odds have Houston at minus 120 to win the conference, Texas Tech at 470, Iowa State at plus 600, and then Kansas at plus 800. Will, who's your favorite, and then who is your favorite underdog?
I mean, this is a tough one. Again,
I'll go ahead and go first if you want.
No, I mean, I know I had an answer. I'm just second guessing myself. So Houston has 2 losses in conference so far. Texas Tech has 1, Iowa State has 2, and I think Kansas has 2 or 3 now at this point. Do you know how many they have? Yeah, they have 3. Tech? No, Kansas. Texas Tech only has 1 loss. So Texas Tech has the fewest losses. That's why they're in second. I like Iowa State at plus 600. I mean, they just took care of business against Kansas at home. I feel like they can play with anybody. They have the same amount of losses as Houston. Very similar play styles. Not very many holes in their game. Just solid, play hard, athletic. I think my pick to win the conference and my best value pick is the Iowa State Cyclones.
I don't hate that. I'm going to go with one that's a little bit under the radar, especially since I was in the category that thought that they were a little bit overrated to start the season. I think Texas Tech should be a little bit higher than plus 470. The rest of their road is easier, and that's relative for the Big 12 because they have so many teams that can beat anybody on any given Saturday or weeknight. But really, if you look at it, they play Kansas at home. They go to Iowa State, which is a little bit scary. TCU at home, Texas at home, Baylor at home later in the season after they have a home and away with them. if they can steal a few on the road, I think plus 470 is a good spot for them, especially with they only have one conference loss right now, and they don't play Houston again. I think that's huge. Houston does own the tiebreaker with them. They beat them earlier in the season. But if they can just continually to pound out wins, really, I don't think that plus 470 makes a whole lot of sense for a team that is this deep into conference play and they're winning the tournament or they're winning the conference right now. I don't know. Houston's favored for a reason. They probably will be favored the rest of the way against teams, maybe actually Kansas. They play Kansas on Saturday. They'll be favored in most of the games the rest of the way. But I like Texas Tech. I like the Red Raiders to close it out at 470 if I'm going to get a best value pick.
Yeah, Ken Palm has Houston favored in every game for the rest of the way, and they are first in the Ken Palm rankings. So, not sure how much stock you put into the Ken Palm analytics. He is a big fan of the Houston Cougars.
For good reason. I mean, they've continually just crushed good opponents all season. So they're a great team. So, well, that wraps up tonight's episode. Looking forward to these Saturday games. Will, always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely put out some picks Friday night. Unfortunately, unlike it feels like every other sport, we don't get lines for games until when is it normally like the evening before? I normally just wait till the day of, but you can get them the day before as well. So follow our Twitter account, X account, Statletics_bets, and see if we can put out some winners.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.